Perfect. To start, I would like to ask the audience here with us to ask your questions to the speakers.
So why a template instead of a starter project?
Rina?
Sí.
Okay, thank you so much for catching me out on this slip up, because RTEs do have a basic imperfection that prevents us from work sharing. They're not work shared, they do not have work sets in them, and project coordinators do not like to have to reset work sets up every single time. So yes, a sample project is definitely the way to go. Thank you so much.
Any other questions from the audience?
Thank you. I have a question for Neil. You mentioned that you support the model-based approach. So is that in the entire, let's say, project stage, like in every stage? Because the feedback that I'm getting from site is that the guys like when I prepare like really nice, clear drawing, and they can just look at the drawing and see dimensions and everything, and they do know it's coordinated with, because we did all the coordination previously, but they say it's just time consuming to measure in the model where the pipe is, from the wall, from the floor, and what is your opinion on that?
Thank you for your question. We're trying to adopt it for all phases of the project. The reason behind this, because as soon as you print a drawing, it's out of date. And quite often, I've seen it on site where someone's installing something to a previous revision. I don't want to see that happen. So yes, the guys on the ground don't like working in models, but if you gave them a free iPad at the end of the project, they don't mind it. So the more we educate these people and bring them on the journey, the quicker the adoption will be applied. But as I said, I've seen it as soon as it's out of the system, it can be redundant. Change happens quite often. There's field change, so on and so on. They just got to get used to these new processes. Similar from when we went from a drawing board into CAD and now into BIM. It's a journey. They need to join it as well.
And also,
Great
if
question.
I may add something, there's also, one of the challenges with Revit is the really steep learning curve that is involved. With AutoCAD, you can be productive within 30 minutes. You may not be using blocks, you may not be dimensioning correctly, but you will still be able to come up with something that looks correct when it is printed out, right? With Revit, that isn't the case. So there are a lot of people who will regard Revit with fear, with abhorrence, with non-acceptance, and the most frequent pushback that I've heard of has been, but it was so much faster to do with AutoCAD. And what about whatever happens, when you're further down the road in the project? I don't know if this website still exists, but there was a website called Revit Sucks. Take a look at that.
Just to add to that, you say about people opening models, but we now have cloud-based solutions that make it even faster. You probably can automate this information as well. So really, there's probably only a few disciplines that really need a drawing, but that's most likely to come from fabrication or another part of the project. Why are we still producing drawings?
Sorry, I may not be clear. We are using ACC Cloud, and they are using iPads on site, but still they want to see 2D drawing instead of going through the model and taking the measures, So we are not printing the drawings, we are using iPads, it's just they prefer 2D information instead of 3D, which is different from what you said, and that is the model-based approach, so I just wanted to hear your opinion on that. Thank you.
Any follow-up? Yeah, go ahead.
Just picking up on something that Rina mentioned about that fear that when you show someone new something you like Revit, it's almost that fear of the unknown, that worry about the steep. Can you hear me okay? Oh, sorry. So you mentioned that fear of like new technology, that kind of the fear of that steep learning curve, particularly with things like Revit. I was just wondering from any of the panel what your tips were for overcoming that fear, for kind of reassuring people.
Okay, I think the first thing to do is to show them the results, that how Revit is making their life a lot easier. Even though the path taken may not be as direct, may be a little convoluted, but going on further towards the end of the project, it will yield results. For instance, you're not drawing lines and creating a table and typing in a door screen, are you?
Move it closer.
Closer? Oh, okay. So you're not actually typing your door schedule, are you? Technology, can't live with it, can't live without it. Oh my goodness. So now you can hear me, right? You're not actually typing in tables, you're not creating room finishes. However, a true example, something that took me quite a bit of to really overcome. My interior design department asked me to create them a dumb room finish schedule because they did not want to deal with entering parameters for their wall finishes. They would rather that I gave them a dumb key schedule that they could type into. And yeah, that definitely made me hurt. So the other thing to do is to inject a bit of humor. You know, I tell people that my vision of Revit is a film star wearing minks who throws a tantrum every day and still wins an Oscar. So, which is why the director has to cater to all the tantrums and deal with them, maybe wine, maybe chocolates, who knows, but just to get the actress to give another, Oscar-worthy performance. Another way to overcome the fear of Revit, anybody who is coming to AU 2022, look on the AU 2021 website and look for the Superb Guide to Easy Revit. Show people that. And that should get them over a lot of the fear, because one of the objectives that I had made very clear at the beginning of the presentation was this will remove your fear of Revit. And you know what, if you come for the 2022 version, that's going to be even more fun.
If I may add, I guess in addition to just kind of telling, listening is probably a very, very underrated activity. So truly understanding what they're afraid of will tell us quite a bit about what their approach is, regardless of the tech. I come from the horizontal BIM side, and it's way more complex to deal. Not that this Revit is not complex. You're dealing with Mother Nature there, right? So I think listening is a very, very underrated activity, and that'll help us collectively quite a bit.
There's a question from the audience.
Just to piggyback on that, listening is absolutely critical, but oftentimes hearing what they're not saying can be really, really important, because if someone's having a problem with Revit or with BIM, they probably don't know what the problem actually is, so they're describing something else. So figuring out what they're actually getting stuck on can really be tough to do.
Yeah, completely agree with that, yeah.
And actually, sometimes, depending upon what's going on with the project, sometimes it's more time efficient for you or me to just step in and do it. And if they have enough time left on their schedule, then does it make sense to actually, maybe record a screencast and send it to them, or just, settle down on a Zoom call and kind of walk them through the process and make sure that they get it right.
All right, there's a question from the audience here.
Can you hear me? Yeah. So my question is to Rina. So I ran from another training here because I was interested in the magic tricks, and actually they were more magic than I was expecting. I thought that you would come up with post-its or something, but no, you seem to be very fluent and comfortable with different technological tools. So you spoke about PyRevit and Grasshopper and Revit as well. And I'd like to understand how deep you go into the knowledge of these tools and what's your learning strategy. Like, what do? Do you sit down with a person that knows a lot about PyRevit, or do you go to Udemy and you buy yourself a course? Like, I'm asking that for my own career development. Like, how do you learn? How did you develop it? This is not rocket science, but these are very complicated tools to be fluent with, if you understand me.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you for your kind words. You're much too kind.
Thank you.
And as far as my learning journey has gone, let me tell you, I'm kind of a combination of what it was that Narciso mentioned. You know, the people who are self-taught and who have taken a course and who are certified, things like that. In the mid-90s, one of my co-workers, and this was in India, one of my co-workers came in to work with a pirated version of AutoCAD Release 12. I was hooked. He put it on the machine. I was just hooked. After that, I just started learning, went back to school for my master's, took all the CAD courses I can. And then I went into teaching higher ed. So in teaching, I was put into a Revit class. So my strategy was stay one step ahead of the students. So this was enough experience for me to be able to get an opportunity in industry as a BIM specialist. Once I was in that position, and this is something I found really, really helpful. Go to the Revit forums. You will get immediate help. You post a question, somebody or the other will be there to answer your question, maybe give you screenshots, maybe fix your family for you, maybe give you a screencast. I learned so much because in 2016, I just knew whatever Revit there was going on in the classroom, which is not much. Whenever I had a problem, I went to the Revit forums. And then I learned and learned and learned. And as I learned, suddenly I realized that in addition to getting solutions, I am giving solutions. And I'm getting really high ratings for that. So as a result, the next step was going to, my first AU was in 2017. And the fun part was I'd be in the hallway and then suddenly, a random person comes up, gives me a hug. I don't know you, who are you? And her response was, thank you, you helped me with my project. I would run into people who would say, I've seen your stuff, you're good. Why aren't you an elite? In 2018, I was an Autodesk Expert Elite. And then after that, the questions changed. Why aren't you presenting at AU? 2019 was the first time I presented at AU. So another thing that, another part of my career journey was I have always tried, fought, scratched, kicked, bit in order to get project work. If you are involved in a project, you have a hands-on view of what's going on, you've got a hands-on handle on how to make your project better, and then you can practice, and nobody's watching over your shoulder, and you know how to fix it, right, if it goes wrong. So my current job description is 50% production and 50% BIM management. Of course, it's never 50-50, it's 95% production and the rest BIM management. And I credit that for my knowledge because a lot of times I solve a problem and then I take that problem and put it into whatever presentation it is that I'm doing. So just keep on doing stuff. Keep thinking, keep digging into the problems. Don't just go, oh, Revit doesn't let me do that. That, by the way, is a sentiment I have no sympathy for. Just dig into the problem, dig. And the more you know, the deeper you'll be able to dig in the problem and arrive at a solution. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, it did. Thank you.
Yes, I would like to reinforce what you said with my example, the one that I did in my keynote. When I did my first project, when I started to learn Revit, I didn't have anybody telling me how to do things. I just learned with the Linda training course of Revit. And after that, I just faced the Hydro Terminal 2 model with no help of anybody. My BIM manager didn't know about Revit. He knew about BIM, but not about Revit. So he was all the time telling me, Google it. Or the the forums, and I did the hydroterminal 2 model, the roof, just with like that in 6 months of headaches and pain. 6 months that I didn't know. I came from AutoCAD to Revit. I didn't know where the problem was. I didn't know how Revit was working, and it was a pain. And the forums was the only solution that I had at this time.
And now you're over here. On the forums, you will meet Revit experts who have been around ever since the software took birth. That's the kind of expertise you'll get there.
Thanks for that. If I can, I don't want to extend myself too much, but for example, in terms of PyRevit, how deep do you go until you have to delegate that to another person, to a specialist? Are you the person that works 100, like, do you develop your stuff? No. You know the basics and you delegate. All right.
With PyRevit, it actually started as a troubleshooting tool, because when I'm scanning models and then somebody told me, hey, you don't have to save out the families and wait for Revit to crash. Go into PyRevit, use Family Checker, and there I am, and I'm able to check the families really fast. So after that, it kind of became a game. Hey, let's click on this. Let's see what this does. Let's click on that one. Let's see what this does. Ooh, it turned all my tabs red and blue and green. And that is actually the best way to learn. Just keep clicking on stuff and play with the software, see what it does. One of the first training courses I attended was for AutoCAD 10. And I was the only woman in a room of middle-aged men. We're all middle-aged here, right? But at that time, I was not middle-aged. And all of them were fresh off the board, and they were terrified of clicking stuff because they thought they would break something. And the response to that was, just hit U for undo. You can't break anything. I mean, not unless you really try.
At that, I am afraid that we've run out of time, so we have to conclude this panel discussion, but I think we can all agree that some really good points were made. So I want to thank you all for your time and for sharing your expertise today. And as you all know, here in Dublin as well, everything's recorded. So if you'd like to go back, go to AirMeet, and that's where you can ask additional questions as well. Thank you, everybody, and please give them a round of applause.
Thank you.